going to be converting color images into black and white, and there are a lot of reasons to do this. It could be that the color in your photo just isn't working. It could be kind of dull or drab. In the case of photographs of people, it could be that the white balance is off and that the skin tones are weird, or maybe you had mixed lighting sources which gave really unusual color. In the end, creating a black and white image can be more powerful and yield a much stronger image. But black and white, or converting to black and white, also gives us another advantage. When we make the conversion, we can target specific colors, and we can lighten or darken those colors in the conversion. So we can really go for a very dramatic photo in black and white that might be unattainable in color. In the old days, one would have to use a filter to accomplish this, like a yellow or red filter, in order to darken the skies of the photograph. In our case, we can do everything digitally, and we have much more precise and stronger control over the conversion process in making a black and white image. So I'm going to be using Photoshop, and the controls are essentially the same thing if you're using Lightroom or Lightroom Classic. You can really do the same thing in Snapseed or Photoshop Express, and I can explain how that would work just as well. It's a pretty simple process, and it's a lot of fun to see how you can create a dramatic photo pretty easily. I'm going to start with this photo that we used before in the previous video of the Ashokan Reservoir in New York. And if you remember, it has a lot of blue haze. The overall feel of the photo is very bluish or very cool, with a little bit of warmth in the clouds with the sun breaking through. So the first thing we need to do is to open up our black and white tool. And there are two ways we can do it. We can go to the bottom of the layer palette and hit on this icon for our adjustment layers and go to black and white, and that'll open it. Or we can go up to the top, hit on layer, new adjustment layer, then down to black and white, and it'll ask us, is the name okay? We could change it if we want, but I'm not going to. Say okay. So now we have two black and white layers. I'm going to use both of them only so that we can show the differences between different settings on the black and white palette. Other than that, you'll only need one black and white layer. And it would be the same for Lightroom or Lightroom Classic. If you're using that instead, the tools are going to be pretty much the same. If you're on Snapseed or Photoshop Express, we'll explain that later as to how you can accomplish the same things using those programs. So anyway, so let's go to our first black and white layer, and we'll click on this little black and white symbol here to bring up the tool in the Properties menu. If you don't have the Properties window open, go under Windows, go to Properties, and make sure that's open so you can see what's going on here. So when we open up the black and white properties, or the black and white tool, to begin with, it comes in at a default setting. And you can see we have 6 different colors here: red, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and magenta. And sliding to the left will darken that color, sliding to the right will lighten that color. And we have that ability for each color. So going back to the default setting, you can see that mostly you're pretty much around the middle values for darkness or lightness for each color. If you think about when photographers shot black and white images in the film era, they would use black and white film, and then to make adjustments to that, they would use yellow or red or different colored filters over the lens. And like in this case, we have a very bluish image. And if we used a yellow or red filter, it would darken the opposite color. So in the case of yellow, it would darken the blues and it would lighten the yellows. Or in the case of red, it would darken the greens and blues and lighten the reds. So in this photo, it would be good to use because it would darken the clouds and the blue sky behind the clouds to add a little more drama and contrast to the image. So going back to the default setting, we see we basically have pretty much like middle values. But if we wanted to go to start adjusting that setting, I'm just going to use the other tool that we brought in, but it's the same thing. So right now it comes in a default setting, but we have presets for typical kind of filters that one could use. So like in this case, we were talking about using a yellow or red filter. I can go to the yellow filter now, and you can see what that does. It darkens the blues and cyans and it'll lighten the red and yellow. We have a value of, let's say, 120 on the red, and if we go back to our original, we had a value of 40 for the default setting. So going back to our adjustment now, so using a yellow filter, you can see we're getting a little more dramatic change in the tonal values of the conversion. And I can go even further. I can take the blue and cyan and make it even darker. So if I slide it to the right, you can see the mountains are getting darker, and even parts of the clouds are getting darker also, and the sky behind the clouds. And the same with the cyan filter. If I bring that to the right, you can see a pretty dramatic difference in the blue sky and areas of the clouds and the mountains because there's so much blue haze in the photo. And likewise, lightening the reds or yellows will lighten those warmer areas in the clouds. You can see if I bring it all the way to the right, they'll pretty much get blown out, which we don't want. So you want to bring it back to the point that we still have detail. The same with the yellow. So you can see how we can really customize the conversion to whatever contrast in the image that we're really looking for. So here's the photo of the three girls that we had worked on previously, and it's got a lot of nice color to it, so it'll be interesting to see what happens when we try to convert it to black and white. So I've got the black and white adjustment layer already in place, and the properties are shown in the property window with all the 6 different color sliders. So if I click on this to make it visible, you can see this is the default setting, and it looks reasonably well. It looks like maybe the skin tone on the girls is a little dark. So let's see what we can do. Now, if we go back and look at the original image, we've got deep reds and blues, and there's green in the background. And we can begin by looking at what if we just work with the presets. So if I go, let's say, to a blue filter. If you go to a blue filter, it's going to lighten the blues and darken the yellows or reds. So in this case, you can see what happens. All the skin tones have gotten very dark because you have a lot of yellow or red in the skin tone, and it made it darker. And the blue, which is their pants and the shirt on this girl here, gets very light. So that doesn't really work for this. If we go to the green filter, it's a little bit better. It opened up the skin a little bit. Doesn't look a whole lot different from the default. That's our default, and that's the green, slight difference. But then let's look at if we go, let's say, to a red filter. So that will lighten the reds and deepen the greens and blues. So you can see that the leaves at the top got darker, the skin tone got much lighter, and the shirts as well got lighter because this girl's shirt was red. So it adds a bit of lightness, and it's sort of a nice contrast with the dark areas around it, so it's really not so bad. And if we go to yellow, it's pretty similar. There's not even a whole lot of difference. So you can see just by using the simple presets, we get a lot of variation in how the image is converted from color to black and white. We just looked at a couple of examples of how we could create dramatic black and white images from color photographs. In part 2, we'll look at a few more to get a better understanding of what the possibilities are in creating these images.